Okay, as was mentioned, I do counseling and consulting, and that's through New Day, and I've got all my contact information on a little business card, which is on the back there, so if you want to keep the conversation going, you have some questions, email is fine. I also do meet with people at my home office, and I do meet with people via Zoom. That's like Skype video conferencing, so I have meetings that I do with people there as well. And I'm a dad. This is my brood this fall. So I got 3 big boys that are in college. The one all the way at the end there is going to be graduating this spring from college, and he's going to be heading off to Seattle to do some more school. Then I've got a high schooler, freshman, Jack, and then Chloe at the end, warrior princess with her mighty steed, our fur baby, Ben, little Bentley. He's great. We love him. And if there's only one resource that I could ever give you about how to parent well, it would be this book. Dr. Ross Campbell's with Jesus now, but his book has been the best book that I've encountered. It's pretty readable. It's pretty focused. It's not only from his own clinical experience as a doctor, he's a dad, and it's spun off some other great books, How to Really Love Your Angry Child. So he's taken some of the principles in this book and focused it to kids who really do struggle with anger. Another one is How to Really Love Your Teen. So if you look up that on Amazon, you'll get a lot of different hits on the different spin-offs. But this is the one that started it all. And I think that's a new printing. I think this is a little bit of an older printing. And that will help you take the principles that we're going to be touching on here and really hold on to them and grow them with the co-parenting that you're trying to do. So the first thing I wanted to start with is that relationship is what should direct your leadership as opposed to authority. And that is countercultural. Many of us grew up with parents or in a system and structure where authority was what was used to lead. And, stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about, that kind of authority. And unfortunately, that kind of engagement and leadership, it works, for instance, in the military. But even in the military, though I haven't served, I've got plenty of friends who have, and every officer I've talked to says, if you're leading by authority, then you're not really leading effectively. Even in the military, they teach us not to lead with authority. So it's something that comes instinctively, but if you want to co-parent well, and you're relying on authority, that is power and submission, and you're going to do what I say because I'm the one in charge, and there's a command structure, and this is how it's... If that's your paradigm, if that's how you want to engage parenting, right off the bat, it's going to create a lot of friction. Friction because people generally don't open their hearts to authority figures. You think about Jesus, who had the right to have as much top-down authority as anybody. All of his disciples should be asking how high on the way up when he says jump, right? He had the right of anyone to manage his world through that kind of authority paradigm. And you just watch how Jesus led, and he didn't do that. The only time you really see him do that is when he walks into the temple at the start of his ministry. And he says, my Father's house is not supposed to be a place of robbers and thieves, and he starts whipping animals and kicking over tables and driving people out. And I would argue Jesus had his badge on as an enforcer of his Father's house in that role. It's a bit unique, and we can talk about theology behind why that works. But watch how he engages with his family, his spiritual family, those guys in the boat when it's going down, or feeding the 5,000, or wherever. And he's not relying on top-down authority, and that's not actually what created the responsiveness in his disciples, was top-down authority. It was his commitment to relationship. For instance, when he rises from the dead and he reveals himself, he doesn't even actually reveal himself to the 12. It's the women. Those are the ones he entrusted with the authority of the message of his resurrection. And that's just such a wonderful irony because of how women were treated at the time. You need two women's testimony in court to equal one believable story. It's interesting, there were two women who saw Jesus and both brought it. Were they believed? No, they weren't believed by the men. But anyway, to be in a culture like that where women were regularly reminded of their second-class status by the authority structure of the time, to have them open their hearts up to Jesus tells you that he was engaging them in a different way than their culture, than their fathers, than their husbands, who were all using top-down patriarchal authority. That was the MO. And it's not entirely different, especially in conservative Christian circles today. You can still find a lot of parenting books which will empower you as a man to have the authority to run your house, that you're the king of your castle. And so, again, you get to decide how you want to engage your kids and your wife. I'm just saying, if you're invested in the authority paradigm, it's going to create friction right off the bat. It's just going to lead to trouble. Your kids' hearts aren't going to be open to you, and your wife's heart is not going to be open to you. In fact, she's going to try shielding her kids from your intensity, your kids. And that's where this strife starts. Well, she lets them get away with anything, right? Or she's so hard on them all the time. That friction at that core level, where you don't feel like you're connected with your spouse and you're fighting each other over the battlefield that is, are the kids going to get their homework done? Why isn't their room clean when they're out playing? No, we're not going to do the overnight. What about technology? You're letting them use it all the time. Or if I didn't put my foot down, they'd be on it all the time. So looking at co-parenting and realizing that where the friction starts is often in that committed relationship. And you can't necessarily control how your wife is going to respond, but you can control what you do, how you engage, the tone of voice that you use, the way in which you exert authority. How do you use your authority? You can control that. And identifying that if you're falling back on what was modeled to you growing up, you might want to look more closely at that. Well, I got spanked and I turned out fine. I get that. I was spanked. I wish I could say I turned out fine. On a good day, I might say I did turn out fine. But the reality is that spanking is, in many conversations that I've had with clients over the years, spanking is a euphemism for actually harshness and even violence. So understanding that even though they used 50 years ago spanking as a primary management tool for kids, whether that's in the classroom where their kids are getting spanked or at home, that doesn't necessarily mean that 50 years ago kids weren't negatively impacted by the fallout of that intense, harsh engagement. You want to talk about survivors of the Catholic school experience, and you'll hear that level of intensity that those kids encountered, it wasn't a positive experience. Getting your knuckles rapped doesn't open your heart to those figures of authority. And as a Christian father, what we hope to do is to win the heart and mind of our child. Hopefully we can win and woo the heart of our wife. We just can't rely on authority to do that. Authority doesn't woo. Authority intimidates. Authority can control. But it doesn't woo. It doesn't build relationship. And kids have trouble caring about all of your experience until they know you're invested in them, that you're dedicated to them. And that comes through the principles that we'll talk about in a minute here. in your conversations with your wife about the type of parenting that you want to be either changing or enhancing, you need to know the difference between assertive communication and aggressive communication. So aggressive communication, it's raising my voice. It's using body language that is intrusive, intense. Using an edge to my words where there's a harshness that's not hard to detect. Sarcasm, cynicism, a narrowing of my eyes, a clenching of my jaws. All of that, those are aggressive signals. Closing off my body, all of this is communicating. And I think there's enough data out there to tell us that the nonverbal communication, I got a red light here on my, I'm going to do a new one. All right, that one's green. Okay. So, joking about kids being idiots or other kinds of conversations where you're joking about the intellect or capacity of your kids, even if you mean it to be a joke or to be lighthearted or to sort of keep it from getting too intense. One of the things I encourage families and men that I'm working with is try to banish sarcasm and joking, belittling comments. Try to banish that from your normal conversation with your kids and with your spouse. And again, that's something you can control. So even if, so let's say my wife says, Pat, how was your day? And I'm trying to know the difference between aggressive and assertive communication. She says, how was your day? And I say, fine. Just like that. What's she reading from the way that I say that? I'm not yelling. I didn't yell. But there was an intensity in the way that I responded. And your kids and your wife are extremely sensitive to the tone of voice, to your body posture, and to the way your face looks. I was sitting at breakfast with my wife the other day, and she said, you look so grim. I'm just eating my breakfast. Grim, I said? I look grim? Yeah, your face looks so grim. Now, I could have started a fight. I'm not grim. You look grim. I don't know. I could have something. But I said, I don't think I feel grim. I wonder, what do you notice? What looks grim? Well, your brow is furrowed and your jaw is set. Eyes are narrow. Oh, I thought that was just my normal. That's how I look all the time. That's my default setting. Yeah, because my dad, according to that, would have been grim all the time. It's like, I used to have a shirt, and it used to have different blocks of Darth Vader's mask on it. And then it had little names of different emotions he was experiencing. Happy, proud, sad, discouraged. Well, that was sort of my dad, and I guess I haven't, chip off the old block. All that to say that the subtlety of aggressive communication is something that can get you off track quick. You can't cheat. If you're frustrated, it's better to own up to it, not by yelling. That's acting out your anger. Say, if I come home from work and the answer is it's not fine, I can say, well, I was really discouraged today. I was working on a project and my supervisor came in and reworked what we were supposed to do, and I just dumped 20 hours of work. And I'm frustrated and angry, and I don't really feel like talking very much right now. That is a more honest expression than the word fine, right? And when I'm asking my wife to do the math between the word fine and how I wrap that up, tone, body language, when there's a mismatch, it creates tension in my home. It creates tension for my wife, it creates tension for my kids. Now they don't know, what part of fine do I listen to? The angry part of it? The frustrated part of it? the word part of it. How close can I get to Dad right now? How open is he to talk to me about the kid on the bus who called me names that I've never heard before? And everyone was laughing. Like, if you've got a little boy who's needing to process that stuff, but that's what he hears when you come through the door because he's playing in the family room, but he listens, it starts shutting down opportunities for connection. It's more helpful for you to say, Johnny, I want to talk about your day with Dad. Dad needs a few minutes. So I'm going to take the dog on a walk. You think to yourself, but I'm going to talk to Jesus. Get my head right. So that when I come back in the door, I can be open to the family that needs me. And my wife who needs to talk to me about whatever happened with her mom or something. And then you can't always be open to that stuff. There are times when you're going to be emotionally offline. And instead of saying, fine, some version of that, engaging the fact that, I wish I could talk more. I don't have it tonight. I'm so frustrated. I'm not there tonight. You can give yourself some grace, but come back to it. I'm sorry, last night was bad. Today was a little bit of a better day. Could we talk tonight about what you wanted to talk about last night? Circle back around. That makes a big difference with the support that you need from your wife as you move into issues of parenting with your kids. So assertive communication is asking for what you want or what you need or talking about your feelings in a way that's respectful with conversational tone. So you can say things in a conversational tone about how you feel and what you need, and it can still be aggressive. I hope I made that point. So it's being clear. So if you need the kids to stop playing and come in for dinner, being assertive is appropriate. All right, kids, 2 minutes, and video games need to be off, electronic time needs to be off, we're going to be having dinner. I need you to come in. That's clear. It helps as you're parenting that you're making eye contact. I don't think you have to grab their little faces, but I think you can say, all right, look at Dad. And if they're doing whatever on the Wii or whatever, you might have to say, hey guys, can you pause it for a second? Just a minute, I'm almost leveling up. Right? So I get that there's this weird in-between space where you're trying to communicate and they're putting you on hold. And that's triggering for most men. You don't put me on hold. I'm the dad here. I'll put you on hold. So understanding that your own triggering is something you've got to be managing. But making eye contact with those kids, a good strategy. And that's something that Dr. Campbell talks about a lot in this book. That the easiest kids to manage are kids who are feeling emotionally secure. That's just it. The less emotionally secure a kid is feeling, the more squirrely they become. And what Dr. Campbell's talking about in this book is when you get into that death spiral where an emotionally insecure kid is acting out, behaviorally making issues, and you start engaging them on that level. Like, all right, fine. You want to do this? I'll go. And then you start dealing with that misbehavior without ever engaging the emotional needs of the child and the security that is at root. You're gonna get stuck in a power struggle that's just going to keep giving and giving, and it's going to strain the relationship more and more. So understanding that knowing how, and Dr. Ross Campbell lays it out in layman's terms, how do I connect with the emotional needs of my child, and how do I assess that that's what's driving the misbehavior, that they're not just bad kids. That's important to know if you want to be successful in your co-parenting. So assertive communication, eye contact, brief statements offered in a conversational tone, that's something to practice. You probably won't get 100%. Even 50% would be great if you're starting at ground zero. I talked about this just a minute. Inadequacy triggered often leads to conflict, and that is one piece too that I want That's nice. Where is that subwoofer?
It's gotta be below us.
Impressive. Well, whatever he did, that was the right thing. I don't have time to develop the theology of inadequacy, but I think if you look at the curse and how it was visited upon Adam in Genesis 3, the thing that's unique to Adam is that his adequacy is cursed, in that what he tries to produce out of the ground, thorns and thistles are going to come instead. That he's going to be wrestling with his ability to overcome obstacles his entire life. And it's actually going to best him. And then at the end of the day, he's going to turn into a lump of dust. No one's going to remember him. That's his legacy. It might explain why some of the ancients built these, giant monuments to how great they were, because they wanted to overcome the curse. I will not be forgotten. I will be remembered. I'm just arguing for that because I think men in particular, when our adequacy is pushed on, when our competency is pushed on, I think there's a unique rage response that's produced in just about every single man I've ever met, me included. So when the kid puts you on pause because they're doing the deed, that's going to hit you in that adequacy piece. I don't like feeling impotent in front of my 7-year-old kid. That makes me feel small and ignorable when he responds to me that way. And to have a gut level, visceral reaction to that as a man, to that level of disrespect, totally normal, totally natural, and destructive. When we power up, when our inadequacy has been triggered with our wife, who does it all the time, she triggers our inadequacy all the time because we're not enough, and she'll remind us of that. She doesn't let us off the hook. We don't get a pass. And our kids remind us we're not enough. So you and I have inadequacy that's getting triggered on a regular basis, like daily basis. And that's, we haven't even talked about work. We haven't even talked about family of origin stuff, your mother-in-law or anything, right? So managing inadequacy is one of the best avenues to begin getting traction in co-parenting well. Because if you're powering up every time your inadequacy is triggered, you're going to be powering up every day with almost every relationship in your life. And it's going to alienate people from you. You're going to drive people out of your life, including your kids. Your anger doesn't draw them to you. Your authority doesn't draw them to you. The same things that draw you to Jesus are the things that will draw your children to you. Gentleness, self-control. Think about the fruits of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. These are a self that is managed. The good news is the Holy Spirit is pulling you in that direction already. If you know Jesus Christ, if you have a relationship with Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit has already got inertia moving you into those ways of being. But you got to cooperate. You got to decide that that's worth fighting for. And co-parenting can't go anywhere if you're not managing when your inadequacy is triggered. Because then your kids are going to have to walk on eggshells around you. Or your wife's going to have to walk on eggshells around you. Now they're all trying to manage you. And that's not the kind of message and discipleship you want to be giving your kids. Be bristly enough, be intimidating enough that people back away from you. You don't want to disciple your kids, and that's how you manage frustration. You want to model to them how a man is engaging his frustration and his inadequacy, and how instead of raging or disappearing into the garage or the basement or the cabin up north or the bar, instead of disappearing, he's wrestling with that inadequacy. That you can model actually taking a time out. And I would argue that the growth opportunities for you come in the guise of conflict. That your meltdown, that you look back on and you say, yeah, that was not me at my best. And your wife appreciates you saying that out loud because she knows it. And so when you own it and say, yeah, I felt like I was really a little over the top tonight. And she'll be like, yeah. You okay? I don't know. whatever. When you admit that you're over the top, it won't come as a surprise to anybody. They might be relieved that you're finally acknowledging how intense you are. And the conflict is going to be the place where you start to learn to grow. A fellow named Dan Allender, psychologist, author, teacher, he really encourages people, rather than reacting to the stuff that we're discouraged about in their own lives, can you read it? Can you read it? Become curious. Why was I so over the top last night? Why did I stay engaged with my young one in that back and forth that just kept escalating? Why? Why could I not let her have the last word? You become curious, because conflict is when you get the invitation to grow. And yes, when you have a blowout and you're not the man you want to be, there's still the opportunity to read that, do an autopsy. And maybe you'll start to recognize that there's even patterns in the meltdowns that you have. Like they're typically between 5 and 7 p.m. or between 7 and 9 p.m. Or they're on a Saturday morning when you're trying to get something done and your kid wants, start reading it. Because if you can identify patterns, then you can start engaging strategically, knowing I got to bring some wise self-care into the mix. So your wife can be a huge help in that. She loves you. She's committed to you. And if you could be more often inviting her to give you meaningful care, like can you listen to where things have been at, not said in an angry way, but said in an inviting way, that can actually produce a lot of connectedness in your co-parenting. So just realize you're going to screw up. Thank God for the screw-ups. Those are where you learn, if you have the wisdom and the foresight to see that this is an opportunity to teach you something. And it'll tell you about your walk with inadequacy. So what are some essentials for success in your co-parenting? This works with your wife, and it works amazingly well with your kids. Focused time. That's what you need. Focused time with them. And you need focused attention. So yes, sharing an activity, but also during that activity, focusing on them. You saw I have 5 kids. I took 3 of them fishing when they were 5, 7, and 9. And I learned I will never go fishing with 3 kids. Ever again. I had a meltdown. I powered up. I couldn't get one kid's thing untangled before the next one. I found that my inadequacy was just over. And that was a nice Saturday morning. We're supposed to have this bonding father-son stuff, right? I learned it's much better to take them out one at a time. That's tricky when you've got 5. That's a lot of investment. It's a lot of Saturdays committed to fishing. Okay, but I did have to realize, okay, I am a parent. This is what I signed up for. I didn't sign up to get my project done in my basement. I signed up to mentor these kids. I'm the only parent they've got. I kind of had to get my head right. Talk myself through it, let go of some of the things that were priorities for me. But it leads to more traction in my parenting, and as my wife is watching me do that work and that wrestling, her investment in our co-relationship is growing. She's actually respecting the work that I'm doing. Not because I'm perfect, but because I'm wrestling. And then focused touch. So if you've got little boys, you know this already. They just can't get enough wrestling. You just can't. You come home and they're on you. Try to put them to bed and they still want to wrestle. I don't know what that is. I've got those 4 boys. One of my fun memories is all of them in this scrum in the family room. They're all just going at it. And little Chloe, she's probably about 4 at the time. She's got a Disney princess dress on and she's twirling around mirror, and then she hears the scrum, and she looks across the kitchen, and there they all are. And so she rears back and just full on jumps, body slam on the scrum, and she's just going nuts, right? So she's a warrior princess, and she loves touch too. And I think just understanding that that's a huge piece of the language that kids use to open their heart to you is when you're touching them and being involved in having fun with them. And none of that really works well if there's not much self-regulation going on for you as the dad. So knowing that those are essential, and then the quality of your connection with your wife. Relationally, if you have not invested in the quality of your relationship with your wife, you're not going to be able to draw very much from that when it comes time to parenting. Parenting and co-parenting is a lot about trusting the instincts and the impulses of your spouse. And if you're not invested in that relationship, it's not going to be what you need it to be in those times. So, go home tonight and spend some couch time with your spouse. And what are you going to do at couch time? You're going to talk about these 3 questions. What did you like about our relationship this week? Is there anything you didn't like about our relationship this week? And do you need help with anything this coming up week? When I first delivered this at a class at our church, I said, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes. This couple said, nah, it's not going to take 20 minutes. There's going to be a long conversation. Well, sure, because they don't talk about this, ever. So that's an onion with a ton of layers. I get it. If you don't talk this way to your spouse, she's probably going to not know what to do with that. But I'll tell you that her heart longs to be pursued, that she wants to be able to talk to you about the quality of the connection that she has with you. And you need to push into that and invite it. And I like the way it starts. It's positive. What did you like about our connection this week? And then you get to enjoy that. Well, I was glad you didn't pick that overtime shift. That was great. I like that you could take the kids from here, whatever. I don't know how it's going to turn out. But you start out positive. Anything you didn't like about our relationship? Well, you're on your freaking phone all the time, right? Yeah, that's true, I am. That would be a better response than, well, so are you, right? So how do you engage her and what she needs to say about what she's not liking without powering up when she puts in on your inadequacy, which she will do. Spouses have a radar, heat-seeking ability to do that, and they don't mean to. All right, so couch time. I'd encourage you to make that a regular part of your routine, at least once a week. You can even do it as you're dropping off to bed. If you're in bed together, just leave, hey, I just wanted to ask you. All right, and then kids, as we talked about, wrestling time with younger kids, cuddle time at bedtime. Don't you hate it that the kids just want to talk when it's time to go to bed? Questions. They want to talk. How many of you guys have talkers at bedtime, right? They just want to talk. Like, come on, I'm ready to punch the clock, buddy. I gotta go to bed, or I got stuff I want to do. And that's another one of those where you gotta be like, okay, yeah, I did sign up for this. This is sort of like dad duty. You gotta get it in your head that I'm punching the clock right now, and I'm punching in. I'm not punching out, I'm punching in. We're getting the PJs on, we're getting the teeth brushed, doing the story thing, and I'm just going to let you talk. You're trying to get out of going to bed time. I know, you know, and I know. But their hearts are open often in that sort of magical window. So you eat it up. Even if you're using phone and electronics, sharing couch time, being connected, physically close, eye contact, focused attention, and allowing the child to lead activities. That's hard to do. Kids don't think it's hard to do. It's hard for adults to let the kids lead. So I found that my little girl wanted me to play with her little hedgehog toys. And they had a little house and a little car. And she kept wanting to use the car to ram the kitchen of the little porcupine family, whatever. I'm like, what kind of game is this that we're playing? I wouldn't have directed the play that way, but she wanted to have fun and make crazy things happen, and the crazy mom hedgehog's doing crazy stuff. So she's leading that play, and I'm just on the floor like, okay, this is a crazy mom. Yeah, no. She's having fun. As kids get older, talking about their fears and struggles and setbacks, and that sweetness happens if you have that relational connectedness. their hearts will open to you. And then you get to mentor them as they head into their later childhood and into their teen years. Now you get to shift gears into this mentorship because the quality of the relationship is there. You can repair because every kid wants his dad and mom involved in their lives. I mean, to this day, I don't care how old you are, you long for the connection, affirmation, value, and pursuit of your dad. I don't care if he's dead. I don't care if he's a deadbeat. I don't care if he's James Thompson. You have that desire in your heart, and so your kids. Your attention, your connection, your affirmation is a game changer, and they never lose the appetite for it. And if they're fighting you on it, it's probably because there's some pain that needs to be sorted through their inner relationship that they have with you. And sometimes you have to do some cleanup for quite a long time. And if it's really complicated, you probably have to get a helping professional like a counselor in the mix to start sorting through and unteasing some of how all that gets tangled up. And again, I just want to say that when it hits the fan, that's when discipleship happens. So, you go home tonight, you're coming off a spiritual high, and then it's like World War III. Like, that could happen tonight for you guys, which I'm sad about. But the enemy would love to wreck all of the things that you aspire to be and do coming out of this day. In fact, I bet he's waiting for you in the parking lot. He might even be texting you on your phone before you can get out of here, trying to wreck what you aspire for. So just know that this is a spiritual battle, and you don't have to be perfect. Grace and mercy is the thing that sanctifies us. Grace and mercy, not law, not doing it right. That's not what sanctifies us. So you've got to just say that to yourself. Grace and mercy is what you need because you blow it all the time. It's not an excuse or a get-out-of-consequences-free card. You go home tonight and lose it, there's going to be consequences for that. There's going to be emotional blowback that's going to happen. Guaranteed every time. So you don't get out of consequences, but you do have the opportunity to grow. Every blowout, every meltdown is an opportunity for you to grow. And if you blame, if you minimize, if you justify, you're missing your opportunity to grow. But you step into growth with humility, and you're going to find that your spouse is likely going to be eager to join. I realize our time is gone. A fellow named Adam Young, who's got a podcast, Adam Young's podcast, talks a lot about how to regulate your affect. Affect is your emotional well-being. And the sweet spot is the 4 to 7 range. If you're maxed up, powering up, you're going to have trouble regulating. And if you're shutting down and disappearing on the low end of the scale, that too is problematic. And if you grew up in a home where emotional violence, verbal violence, physical violence, if that was a normal part of the mix, the chances of you being highly reactive, being able to bounce high or low on this scale, that's really likely. It's one of the legacies of growing up around that kind of harm and intensity, is you just are more reactive to stress. So you power up faster, and it usually takes you longer to power down. That's my story. I grew up with a lot of intensity in my home, so when my kids are getting close to offline, I light up like a Christmas tree. And it's really hard for me to bring that back down. So I've had to invest my own counseling to try to help me come to grips with what is that, and how can I start slowing that escalation down in my own heart. And I'll tell you that that's built a lot of loyalty in my wife as she's watched me try to wrestle with that. So understanding how to regulate affect, model taking a time out. You, as grown up, I found that the times when I would lose it are times when we needed to get stuff done by a certain period of time. Stop dorking around. We're going to brush your teeth. We're going to brush it right now. Should have been done 30 minutes ago, right? Like when there's a time or school bus is coming. I can't find my shoes. We're going to wear these shoes. I don't want these shoes. Time. That was for me. Those were triggering moments. They weren't for my wife, but they were for me. So understanding that I needed to start learning, okay, I know we got to get our teeth brushed right now. Daddy's going to go into his room. I'm just going to calm down a little bit, and then I'm going to come back. And I'm working on regulation. I'm working on breathing, slowing down the adrenaline that's going on. Okay, I can handle this. They're only 8. I am the adult. I need to be the adult. So model taking a time out. That's something I did with my kids, and then I could encourage them to do that as well. Thanks for your attention. This is a huge topic. And again, to keep the conversation going, and I would encourage reading this book with your wife and getting on the same page with your wife through an approach to raising your kids like that. And I know you guys have got places to go. I'll be here, so if you have questions, you want to engage me afterwards. But if not, thanks for coming. You're dismissed.